Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon, the podcast, where we dive deep into all things health and wellness to help you find health and healing inside and out for now and forever.
Hello and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon. I am Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice Trifecta Collective. And today you are getting just me. And, at the time of this recording, obviously by the time this comes out, we will have a title. I don't have a title yet here, but really what I wanted to talk about today is blocks that really come up and start to impact our ability to heal and heal at a really deep level. And, the few kind of big things that I chose to talk about today, and I've got a little list in front of me, are things that are particularly true and relevant for women. And I primarily, have done many healing spaces with women from a personal standpoint. And I will say most of the clients I do, like really a lot of the deeper, I'm not talking protocols, I'm not talking like nutrition, I'm talking like deeper healing. These are almost always themes that come up. And I also want to share that, I don't think any of us are perfect when it comes to this. And I also don't think that's the goal. These are also things that, I continue to work on. I don't have everything figured out. I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And I also think that throughout our healing journey, which for me is basically, most of our lives, I don't know as though there's an end date or a stopping point to some of this deeper healing, because things can come up and things can come up at different levels. And these are just some of the really big ones. And these have been coming up in a lot of conversations here recently, which is why I felt this was particularly relevant. So the first kind of big overarching theme that I wrote down here is getting in tune with yourself and your emotions. And I know this can be really hard. I also know that this can be really uncomfortable. And I will say, even for me still, big emotions can still be very challenging and very overwhelming for me. I'm someone who grew up and, I think many of you who have experienced a lot of childhood and maybe early adulthood trauma will relate to this. But, our ability to really start to be in our body and fully be in our body. And what this really means, like for me, is, okay, if I close my eyes and I tune in to my heart, what is my heart feeling? What is present for my heart? What emotions, what themes, what is very present for me? If I tune into my belly, and, if you're new to this, I would say belly in general, for me, and those of you who maybe are on, and follow more of the energetic side of things, this might be specific chakras. What am I feeling in my solar plexus? What am I feeling in my sacral chakra? What am I feeling in my root? What am I feeling in my throat? What is coming up from my throat chakra? These kinds of things. But whether that's kind of your jam or not, this is still really important. And if you don't learn how to feel and fully feel your emotions, your ability to heal is going to be substantially limited. And once again, like for many of us, it wasn't safe to feel. That I think that's a big part of it. It wasn't safe to feel growing up. For me, this looked like, I grew up with a single mom. She was an alcoholic for essentially my entire life. And, anytime, and I remember like very early memories of this, of like anytime I would express myself, anytime I'd be like, I'm sad, I'm hurt, I'm angry. And that was a skill in and of itself. And maybe it was even more like, especially like really young, I was just like, I'm feeling something. And just like, here's kind of what it is. it got shut down. It was rejected. I was yelled at. It was too much. I was too much. I was wrong. And, emotions aren't wrong. No emotions are ever wrong. Our response to emotions can maybe not be the most appropriate, but emotions themselves, none of them are wrong. There is no, because of the way you're feeling, that is always right. If you are feeling something, it is right. Now, the action that you take upon that may or may not be appropriate. But, for me, I learned that really young. And, I think as I got through the end of elementary school into middle school, my first suicide attempt was when I was in middle school. I was in 7th grade. And, for me at that time, looking back, this is easier for me to put all of this together. But it was too much. I was feeling so much and I had such strong emotions. And I will say, for me, I am a very, I feel really deeply and I feel a lot, which once again, sometimes for me still, it feels overwhelming. It feels like it's too much. It can be hard for me to really tap into that. I've mentioned several times now that for the past year and a couple months at this point, anytime I feel deep sadness and I need to cry, and I'm not taking the time and effort to acknowledge that, to process it, to really feel into that, I get really nauseous. And that is how it's presenting for me at this point in time. And once again, that is still pretty new for me. And thinking back, I had all of these emotions. I was so hurt, not feeling seen and heard as a child. And that led to rebellion. And it also really led to me thinking emotions were wrong. And it was wrong to feel these emotions. And, I think it was wrong to feel emotions. And also I was so hurt as a child. I felt so much sadness. I felt so much grief. I felt so much hurt. And it felt so overwhelming that I just learned to shut it down. And my only solution at that time of how do I get out of this was one, shove it down, which obviously didn't work super well. And for me, once again, my first suicide attempt was in 7th grade, and those kind of continued through the end of college, which is a really long time. And for me, it was, looking back, this is easier to put together, but I didn't know what to do with these emotions. And it was too much. And it was too much for my brain. It was too much for my body. And I never was taught what to do with these emotions, except taught that they were wrong. So I wanted an escape, and that was what suicide for me was throughout, the decade that I really experienced a lot of those emotions and feelings and had many attempts during that period of time. I just didn't know what to do with these. And most of us, I think now maybe it's a little bit different with some children. And I know there are parents out there who do an amazing job at teaching their kids this because they recognize that they were never taught this, but how to feel and what to do with our emotions. And then as an adult, now we got to figure this stuff out by ourselves. And a huge first step in our healing work is learning how to feel emotions. And once again, if this is early on for you, if this is new for you, gosh, is this so overwhelming? And, I see clients all the time, I see people all the time and we're talking about big traumas. We're talking about big hurts in their lives and they apologize for crying. And for me and any space that I hold with, whether that's in a consultation or whether it's with a client or in a group setting, all feelings are welcome. And whatever you need to do with those, if you need to scream on a call with me, if you need to cry on a call, if, whatever needs to happen, it's okay. And that's really healing in and of itself is getting that validation and having someone or being in a space where it is safe to do that. And once again, this is very challenging and this is a continual process, but if you do not feel your emotions and allow them to be felt and expressed, you're going to have a very challenging time healing. And when you do start to feel your feelings, man, can it be really overwhelming, especially if you don't have an outlet, a safe, keyword here, safe outlet to be able to express yourself. And that's a really big deal. And that many people are in a space where it is not safe. And, if you're looking for, like a first step or maybe an earlier step in deeper healing work, maybe you already do like mindfulness practices daily. Maybe you've gone to therapy. Maybe you're in therapy, and hopefully, if you are in therapy or working with someone, there is that encouragement to feel all of your feelings, because it's really hard to do any other deeper work until you can learn to start to feel your feelings. And I think after that, once you start to learn how to feel feelings, understanding where you're feeling those feelings. And once again, I know this is really hard. And I know when I first started doing a lot of deeper work, I was working with people and they would ask me, where do you feel this? Like, where is this present for you in your body? And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about right now. Like, are you crazy? Like, emotions just come up. Like, you just feel them, and that's a thing. And the reality is I was so out of tune and so not in my body that question was just incomprehensible to me. And I couldn't understand it. It took me a while to really start to understand, okay, this is how this is coming up for me. This is where it is. And then if I start to like peel it back, if I start to really tune into it, what is coming up around this? And a lot of times, especially for me, this felt like there were surface level emotions. Like, okay, this is the emotion that is present for me. But then I'd have to really sit with it and be like, okay, why am I feeling this? And it does not have to be a reason, just by the way. Why am I feeling this? But I would always ask myself, why was I feeling this? Where was this coming from? And where in my body was this really present? Because these are all signs and signals that your body is trying to give you. And part of deeper healing work is starting to be back in your body and being able to connect with this. And, many physical symptoms are just emotions trying to come out. I can't tell you the number of women I've worked with, specifically women who, don't have a lot of feeling from basically the neck down or from like their heart space down. And when I would ask, like, how does this feel like? What is this coming up for you? And they're like, I have literally no idea. And many times, especially if it was around relationships, maybe the relationship with themselves, maybe they were just in a mode of doing, hormone imbalances would start to show up. And when, especially when I do energy work with people and we talk about the sacral chakra, which is just below your belly button, has a lot to do with femininity, masculine, feminine type of energy, specifically the feminine, creativity, sexual trauma, feeling into your body, feeling safe in your body. This is where a lot of this can show up for many people. And it may show up for, once again, I've seen this so many times where we have crazy hormone imbalances, whether that's something like PCOS, endometriosis, and or just really painful periods, really heavy periods, a lot of clotting, a lot of bloating, issues with constipation and or loose stool during their period, headaches, migraines, mood swings, all kinds of stuff. And not saying there aren't physical things going on, especially things like PCOS, endometriosis. We've talked about this many times, but parasites are often at play. But there's a deeper emotional piece as well. And we can do all of the supplementation, we can do all of the nutritional work, lifestyle things, all that kind of stuff. But it gets to a point where that stuff has its limitations, and we have to start digging a little bit deeper. And when we start doing some of that deeper works, that connecting work, feeling into these things, what do you feel? How do you feel? When you're in different situations, like what emotions come up? How does this come up for you? Like, let's talk about past traumas. Like, what have those looked like? What have your experiences been in intimate relationships? What is your own intimate relationship with yourself? All of that plays such a big role here and can have really physical and significant consequences that can present it themselves. And that's just one example. Another example is, I don't know if I've shared this recently. I probably shared it on the thyroid episode, but I also have never met anyone with any sort of thyroid issues that also doesn't have a lot of throat chakra issues. And how this can present, not always, but most commonly, this comes off as people pleasing and not having a lot of boundaries and or upholding those boundaries. And that can really impact our voice. I know people who just like have constant, like their lymph nodes are always swollen. They always feel kind of sick. And it's really just a throat chakra thing where they're not expressing themselves. They're not speaking up for themselves. And once again, for many of us, this helped us survive at one point in time or for potentially most of our lives. And, once again, like I can give you all the supplements. I can give you all the things, nutrients and all that kind of stuff can be on point. And at the same time, I'm going to have limitations if you continue to not express your needs, not stick up for what you need, not be fully expressive of how situations make you feel. If someone talks down to you, be like, hey, look, that really hurt me when you said this. And I just want you to be aware of this. And not that anything has to change or resolve necessarily, except yourself. But being able to fully express yourself is so important and so valuable. So that's another kind of little example here. So that's a really big one. And so, if you are, I'd say this is, and I kind of went in order of like things that kind of come up in layers of healing. So this is maybe an earlier stage of learning how to do this. But once again, I also don't think this is okay, I know how to feel. I know how to be in my body and be in tune with my body, and I'm good. This is oftentimes, once again, for many of us, is a continual process of what does this look like? How do I feel? How do I tune into this? And what do I do with this? A simple exercise, if you're looking one for just getting more in tune with your body and like, what does this look like? How does this feel? Is working on your mind-muscle connection or mind-body connection. And one of the really like simplest strategies that I've ever found doing this, and this was something I learned really early on in my personal training because working out, and when I was working with people in primarily teaching them how to work out and what did that look like, there was a lot of, okay, how does this feel? Where do you feel this? Like, are you feeling a burning, a tingling, a sharp shooting pain? Do you feel nothing? Like, what does this really look like? And so one of the strategies was to literally physically touch your body and squeeze different areas. And if you're not watching this on video, so, starting with your hand and working your way up your arm of like squeezing. What does this feel like? Does this feel good? Does this feel bad? Does something feel tight? Do you want to be squeezed harder? Do you not want to be squeezed quite so hard? Do you want to maybe like rub instead of squeeze? Do you want to like tap instead of squeeze? Like what feels good for you? And do this for your whole body. Do it for your feet, your legs, your belly, your back, arms, shoulders, chest. Like, what does all of this feel? Even, your head, although most of us are, if we're doing this, we're probably very much in our head and not so much in our body. So that's a really simple kind of strategy to start doing this. I also do think there's a lot of value in doing various forms of movement, whether that's somatic movements, yoga, Pilates, strength training, body weight stuff. I don't think it super matters. I think what matters more is the intention behind this and setting the intention of today I'm going to move my body and I'm going to really pay attention to what sensations become present as I do these movements. And it is often easier to do this when you're by yourself versus in like a group class, or if you're listening to someone, walk you through a class or something like that. You can have music on or something, but even a podcast, I feel like can be very distracting from this. But man, is there so much value in really learning how to do this and being reconnected to your entire body. And this opens up a lot for you personally, and also you in various relationships, really work relationships, friendships, definitely in more intimate relationships. This is really important and a huge part of healing. The next one I wrote down is another really big one. And once again, this is mostly women that I see this. And this is often the woman who identifies likely as a type A personality. of someone who is able to do it all. Wonder Woman, Superwoman, a woman who like does it all, has it, quote unquote, has it all, work, family, significant other, friends, doing all these things. This can be very detrimental for our healing process for many reasons here. And once again, this was me. I self-identify as a workaholic until at some point last year when I really realized the detriment this was having in my life. And, I was aware of it. I had conversation with various coaches and people I was working with that talked about this of, what delegation, of doing less, of having more of a life outside of work. And, it took me kind of stepping out of my life and, once again, if you're familiar with my story, basically living my whole life to really, really get this and really have it sink in of work should not be everything. And there's a lot of other life worth living. And a big piece of this is wanting control and, having, doing it all, being it all. Guess what we probably don't have a lot of time for? Sitting in silence, being with yourself, feeling all of your emotions. And it can be easy, I'll say, maybe simple is a better word than easy, to have these shields up, to have these walls up and just be in go, go, go mode and be, get the praise for the work that you're doing, get praise for being, super mom, for doing it all, for, being so on top of things. And it doesn't last forever. It will catch up with you at some point or another, likely. And if you're interested in doing deeper healing work, if you want to feel super safe in your body, if you want to feel your nervous system very regulated, if you want to consistently get out of this fight, flight, freeze mode, learning to slow down and let go of some of these shields and control also has so much value. And for me, one of the things I realized is, as a child, once again, I was a straight A student. I was super involved in all kinds of clubs. And, big reason for that is I did not want to be at my house. My house did not feel safe. My home life was not safe. School felt much safer. And so I spent a lot of time, doing all of these extra things and trying to avoid being at my home as much as possible. I think the other piece of this, for me, I think there were two other pieces. One, I knew that school and being a leader, essentially getting into a decent college that was not close to home was my escape. And that was my next step. And so I took a lot of pride in doing that. And even when I did, quote unquote, escape, when I did leave for college and I went to college 6.5 hours away from where I grew up. So it was not an easy trip to come and visit me. I didn't realize that I had carried that through college, through my entire professional life. And learning how to slow down and learning that and really realizing what I was doing. And, then the question was, okay, now what? What do I do with my free time? Am I doing more of the distractions? Am I spending time working on myself, which also, actually what I have used that as a distraction for myself as well, and been so into the inner work and use that as, once again, like a distraction tool, probably a healthier one than many other things out there, but it was still a distraction from, wanting to live my life and realizing that I didn't feel safe enough, that my nervous system wasn't regulated enough, that I could and wanted to enjoy things outside of that. And once again, this is something that has really come up for me over the last year and, wanting to have this life outside of work, and what does this look like? And I love my work. I love what I do. I love being able to help people. It is a lot at times, doing a lot of this deeper work with other people. And what does rest look like? What is physical rest, mental, emotional, psychological, emotional rest? Like, what do all these things look like? And then also, how do I enjoy my life? And I think this goes back to an even bigger question for many of us. Once again, many of us who grew up in a lot of trauma, especially through our childhood. What do I enjoy? And that's a tough question for many of us. And once again, like, many of us don't even realize it. And I've had a lot of these conversations here recently about this topic. So I know it's not just me. I know it's many, many other people. But what do I enjoy outside of work? Like, what do I like to do? What, hobby wise, like, what does that look like? And, for so many of us who grew up in these trauma-filled childhoods, we didn't have that time and space to figure that out as children. We didn't have that opportunity because we were just trying to survive. And then many of us were just trying to get out. How do we survive while we're here, while we have no choice because we're under the age of 18 and don't really have much of a choice except to be with our parents. And then even when you're out of it, sometimes you're just still stuck here of like, okay, I'm still trying to survive. We're still in this mode because this is what we know. This is what is familiar. And when you start to ask yourself, okay, well, what do I like? What do I enjoy? What brings me joy? What lights me up, especially outside of work? You got to figure that out. It's a really important question. And I think a big piece of this too, especially those of us with a lot of trauma is being able to let go of a lot of these quote unquote safety walls on, these patterns of always filling up our time, of always being Superwoman. And, what are other people going to think if I start to slow down, if I start to take more time off, if I start to set more boundaries and really uphold those boundaries? What are people going to say when I say, no, I cannot help you. No, I am not available. No, I do not have this space to be able to listen to this right now. And what is going to happen as a result of this? Am I going to lose friends? Am I going to lose families? Am I going to get into more fights and more arguments, which, can bring up a whole host of other emotions and feeling unsafe? And what does this really look like? And I also think, a lot of people who are focusing on healing, just broad term healing here, especially those of us with a lot of chronic type issues, letting go of the need to know everything and the need to explain everything and the need to know to control everything. Look, I would consider myself pretty smart, in the health and wellness space. I would consider my team, very much on that same page too. And sometimes we just don't have answers. And, not that we haven't seen, we have seen all kinds of things happen, and we can do our best to explain things from a biological standpoint, from a physiology standpoint, from, an emotional standpoint. Sometimes we don't have all the answers. And I think people can get so attached to wanting to know everything that it almost sets them back in their own healing journey. And I also think this goes with over-identifying with diagnoses. Whenever I bring up, my previous thyroid diagnoses and what does that look like, there's always some hesitation. And it doesn't matter whether you talk to me personally on, a public platform of any sort, there's still continual hesitation because I held on to my diagnosis of, okay, I have hypothyroid. And then, not too long after that, I have Hashimoto's and I have an autoimmune disease. And then I really held on to like, this is a huge result of childhood trauma and toxicity and all of these gut issues and inflammatory issues. But this is my thing. Like, this is the thing that is making me sick. And this is what I'm holding on to. And depending on who you talk to, especially in Western medicine, this is a lifelong thing that you're going to struggle with. I see this a lot with things like IBS, especially things that run in, quote unquote, run in your family. IBS, any sort of autoimmune condition, even like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, like I'll say most of these things can have a genetic component, and it's not a solely genetic component. I only know of one other person in my extended family who has any sort of autoimmune issues, and that is it. And they are not a close relative, by the way. It is pretty far extended family. And, I was racking my brain of like, how did I end up with this? Like, what does this mean? And what I really learned in my healing journey, and really whatever verbiage you want to use of, I put it into remission, I reversed it. Anyways, I have no physical and, like any labs that I run, none of this stuff comes up anymore, and hasn't for many years. And part of that was letting go of the diagnosis, of letting go of the control of this is the thing. This is what it is. I need all the answers. And it was, how to let it go of just like, this is not who I am destined to be. This is not who I have to be. This is not how I have to end up. I don't have to end up on medication. And some people do, some people don't. And I wanted to try really hard not to be on medication. And I really wanted to not, I got to a certain point where I wanted to not identify with this. And I used to say I just had thyroid autoimmunity, or I had thyroid issues, and kind of generally spoke about it. And I also think there is value in sharing that technically I was officially diagnosed with hypothyroid and then Hashimoto's. And that was a big piece of my healing journey. And I think just like letting go of control and the need to know everything. When I left my life last year, I did not have a plan. I knew I was going to Michigan. I knew the date I was going to Michigan, or my fingers crossed. Hopefully this is the day that happens of what my life was going to shift to and where I was going to be. And after that, I really didn't have a plan. And I will say, even still, I don't have a super solid plan. I don't have the next year mapped out. I don't even have I have 2 more months from today mapped out. And that is it. And I think that's terrifying for a lot of people. And, I think if I hadn't done so much work leading up to this and really started to learn how to trust myself, and that is number 3 that we're going to talk about here. But if I really hadn't learned previously how to trust myself, how to trust my intuition, and be able to let go of some of that control, which once again, this was not an easy thing for me. This was not an overnight thing. Letting go of control of my business, of personal life, of, everything that was going on in my life. Super, super challenging, super hard. Still working on it. Do a much better job now. But that's a piece of this, is being able to start to let go of that control. And for reference, needing to control everything, it often comes from unhealed masculine wounds. And what this can look like is, did you see this from, maybe a parent, male or biologically male or female, doesn't super matter. We can embody, unhealed masculine wounds across the board, doesn't super matter. Was this presented to you as a child? And I see this kind of go a couple ways. Did you have a superstar parent who seemingly did it all and was fine? Probably weren't fine at some point, or they probably have some issues going on as an older adult. Were you told that, you shouldn't feel your emotions, you're too much, you're a lot, like you have to be perfect to get any attention, whether that was, a parent thing, a sibling thing, all that kind of stuff. That's a really big deal. And you learn, the other piece is many of us, especially those in a lot of trauma-filled childhood experiences, we didn't have control. We didn't have control of many things. And the few things we did have control over, we held on to so hard. For me, this was school, which, is that healthy or unhealthy? Well, I don't know. I still don't have an answer to that. I did well in school, and it did help, got me into college, and, started off my career, and not doing anything with anything much of anything I learned in college, at this point, and still valuable there. And this also led to an eating disorder, before high school. And, I was really trying to control what I ate. And this, continued on even after, like, quote unquote, healing from this eating disorder. This turned into long-term disordered eating, because food was one of the very few things I could control for myself. And consistently, especially looking back now at all of these patterns, that continued through most of my life. And that was, once again, like, one of the very few things I had control over, and I took it to an extreme. And same thing with, even like a good work ethic. While good work ethic has a lot of value, that can go to extremes, because maybe that is the one thing you can control, is how much you're working and how you show up. And that's, you're seeking praise, you're seeking attention from that outlet. And so, once again, like, learning to let go of some of this has so much value. And I'll also say, healing these masculine wounds can be tough, and it can feel like tapping into our feminine doesn't feel safe, and likely because it has never felt safe before. Things are hard, and you can do hard things. We are all doing hard things in our lives, and we get through them, and we can do them. Letting go of that control piece is a really, really big one. And until you can start to let go of that control, that often will show up for many, many people as gut issues. And this is a big contributor to continued bloating, continued issues, especially like SIBO, like upper GI stuff, because a lot of times this is held, between our solar plexus and then our sacral chakra, kind of those two. So like really high bloating, really low bloating, just full belly bloat, because it can be both for sure as well. And it depends on the person how this shows up. But this is really important. And how do you start letting go of control? Well, that really depends on the person. But, I think learning how to tap into our feminine, learning how to tap into our flowy creative side can go a really long way. The other big piece of this is letting go of control is learning how to ask for help, which, once again, this is really hard and can feel really challenging for so many of us, particularly women. In, asking your significant other, asking a friend, like, hey, I can't do this. I am running myself into the ground. Can you help with cooking, with shopping, with the kids, with, something, whatever it is? Like, hey, can you take, this responsibility for a couple hours so that I can go, like, sit outside, go get a massage, go to this class that I really enjoy. And then with that, even with asking for help, once you get that step, there can often be a lot of guilt that comes up with that, of like not doing it all, not being it all, and having to rely on other people. And once again, this is a common trauma response, because many of us learned as children, and even like early adulthood trauma, that we could only rely on ourselves. And letting go of those shields and that need to control and do everything ourselves and be this superwoman brings us a lot of healing. And once again, it can feel very hard. I'll also say there can be a lot of limitations in this, specifically with significant others. And, if you're going through this deeper healing work and your significant other isn't interested, maybe doesn't understand, isn't doing any work, deeper work on themselves, this can come off more challenging. And Shannon and I are going to be doing an episode on, it's a masculine, feminine energy part 2, focusing on relationships. And we'll talk deeper more into like, how do we start to ask for help? Like, what does this really look like? But, a really small thing, once again, like I want to give you some baby steps here. One of my favorite things to do, and I see a lot of people have a lot of value in this too, 2 things. The first is dance. Put on one of your favorite high vibe songs, close your eyes and trying to be in a space by yourself and dance. for however long the song is, 3.5+ minutes. And just like practice the art of letting go. This also can help you tune into your body. This can also get out some stuck energy. And this is a very feminine act, just listening to your body and dancing. And there's whole classes around this, by the way. I've taken one and it was super cool and great. And I loved it, of just, dance. And it almost was like a journey. It was called Journey Dance too, but it was really like a journey of different types of music. And it was, an hour long of just like listening to your body and dance as it's coming up for you and feeling into that. What does this look like? And what feels good for your body right now? But you can do this on your own and it doesn't take a lot of time. I think we can all find hopefully 3.5 minutes for the day. Finding a space on your own for some of us might be a little bit harder, especially if you have a lot of like younger kids and stuff. But ideally, you can find a time. You can even do this in your car, by the way, and it's not quite the same, but you can still get into it. So that can be a really good tool. The other thing is make a list of big things that you do that maybe bring you a lot of stress. I know for me, like meal planning, meal prepping was a big thing for me. And in my previous relationship, that was one of the big things that I identified of like, this brings me a lot of stress. I don't know what to do with this. I need help. And approaching my partner of like, hey, this just like FYI, this is bringing me a lot of stress, a lot of frustration, and it's taking up a lot of mental space. Would you be able to help me with one night a week of planning? At that time, there was a lot of things going on in my previous relationship, but, at least planning and getting all the supplies for a meal, just one meal a week. I would still cook it, but having at least not having to plan and shop for it was a way to take some stress off of me. And you also have to recognize that if you ask someone to do something and to help you, they may not do it the exact way that you would do it. And you have to be okay with that and recognize that is okay. And the other piece is recognizing the emotions that come up around this. Of oftentimes this is guilt and or shame that will come up, especially when you see them doing something else or maybe they have a lot going on too, and you ask them to do something extra for you. There can be a lot of guilt and shame, and especially as you start to let go of some of the shield of doing it all, of like, but this is what I'm supposed to do, and feeling so guilty in this overwhelm of like shame and guilt, and ending up in a spiral of all of these emotions coming up. And one of the best things and kind of first recommendations that I'll usually share with people is when you feel those emotions come up, try and take a minute, close your eyes, take a deep breath, take a few big deep breaths if you can, and tell yourself, I recognize these emotions are coming up. I know this is a change for me. I know this is something new for me, and I don't have to do it all. People enjoy also supporting me, just like I like supporting other people. And so that's a really, really valuable tool of starting to be okay and recognizing, once again, all emotions are deserve to be felt, and it's what we do with these. These are ones that will often come up, especially when you start implementing these things. And we really just have to sit with them and start to retrain our brain and our body that asking for help, of giving ourselves more time to rest, is okay. And we don't have to do it all. And doing it all probably led us, at least in part, to getting sick. And that's not where we want to continue to be. And it's okay. And you are safe. And it gets much easier over time. Once again, not saying that all of those feelings don't ever go away, because I think in many situations they can still come up. They do still come up for me at times. And once again, just recognizing like, hey, it's okay. Like, this is okay. This is a normal feeling. I'm sitting with this. And this is a lot of what I learned and grew up with. And I'm still okay, even though I asked for help, and I do not have to do it all. So that's a big piece of this too. I think another big piece that can come up for many people in this is the vulnerability piece, and being okay with sharing that maybe you aren't okay and that you do need help and that you are struggling. And not saying that you should be vulnerable with everyone, because not everyone is a safe person to be vulnerable with, and there are levels of vulnerability. But having at least one person that you can drop some of these shields, these walls with, and being able to share what is real for you, what is real in your life, what is real in your body, what is coming up for you and your emotions, and being able to express that in, a safe environment where you're not going to be yelled at, you're not going to be ridiculed, someone's not going to get angry with you, is so valuable. And having a consistent person like that, man, is that so important and provides so much value, can provide so much value in your life. And once again, I know this isn't hard, and you may not have this person yet. You can find them, I promise. They are out there. There are people who want to be your safe person, who you will mesh with and align with and will feel safe. So I think that, if you don't have this person now, seek them, start to maybe seek them out. This could be a friend, a family member, a significant other. There's a lot of avenues. Maybe even it's someone you hire professionally, that feels like a safe person for you, a therapist, a coach, something like that can go a really long way. But you have to give them the opportunity. And once again, there are levels to this, and, you can start to feel out the waters of, how does someone respond when you do share an emotion. I think it's also important in how you do this. And once again, we're going to dive deeper into that into the relationship episode of the masculine and feminine energies. So definitely stay tuned for that. That'll come out in a couple weeks. But that's really important. And just know that the more you bottle up inside, that's really going to limit your ability to heal and continue healing long term. And kind of this goes into this last piece of learning to trust. And this is kind of twofold. The first piece of this is you have to learn to trust yourself. And how I see this, kind of two of the big ways that I commonly see this in many people, is the first one is anxiety, overthinking, the person that wants to, spend so much time thinking about decisions and just analyze and make lists and and not learn to trust themselves in what am I feeling? What is my body trying to tell me? And by the way, your body always gives you signals. Our body is super smart if we learn to listen. And not everyone's body responds the same way or gives the signals the same way. For me, I've spent a lot of time working on this. And for me, all I have to do is ask a yes or no question, and the answer will come to me immediately. And for me, the answer I get a clear yes or no. And that does make it simple. Some people, it's like their belly. Like, does this feel almost like a spark? Does it feel like a spark? Does it feel really good? Does it feel energizing? In which case, that's a yes for most of us. And sometimes if you don't get anything, that means it's a no. If it's not a hard yes, it's a no for many of us. And that's how a lot of this presents in many of our bodies. So, we have these overthinkers in learning to trust. The other thing, is just not trusting anything and not having this. So not having this and not, maybe we're not necessarily overthinkers, but we're almost like frozen in a state of like never being able to make decisions, of just not trusting anything and relying on other people's feedback. Many times, if you have a big decision to make, like, do you go and talk to a bunch of other people about this decision? Not great. Yes, feedback can be really valuable. But at the end of the day, this is your life and your choice and your decision, and it needs to feel right for you. And, I'll tell you, especially someone who, I've really had to learn how to do this. And part of this was, being able to tap into my, what I would call intuition, into my body's signals and having these clear yes or no's. and not second guessing them. And that is a practice, let me tell you, of just, and this goes back to like just letting go of sometimes things don't make logical sense. And sometimes it is the best thing you can do. You know, if I had continued to overthink, you know, this decision to leave my relationship, to sell my house, like to make all these changes last year, who knows where I'd be. And once again, I did not have a really solid game plan, leaving everything. And now, you know, I'm in a great relationship. I have a partner who I, care very, very deeply about. We have a house, we get to travel and explore all of these cool places and do these cool things. I found this love for hiking. And I would have never found these things, or would have taken me a very long time, likely, to really find these things had I not just trusted, not knowing what the outcome would be. And for me, I do think it can be easier if you are religious or have some sort of faith or spirituality. I do find it to be a little bit easier for those of us who fall into any of those categories. And once again, there's no right or wrong here. It's whatever you believe, what feels right for you. And for me, I have this really deep belief, because I've never been proven wrong on this. And this took time to build this trust up of, I believe the universe has my best interest in mind and is only leading me to my highest good. And because I believe that so deeply, I trust. And this means I trust my own intuition. I trust, signs or signals that I get if I ask for them, things like that. And this is very, very challenging. And if you have trouble incorporating new habits, this is usually a big reason why. There's a lack of self-trust going on. And I find that it is easier to learn how to trust yourself first before doing this with other people, or doing a really deep dive with other people. And you have to start small. I didn't start, learning how to trust myself or having this, deep belief that, once again, like the universe is always looking out for me. It didn't start with leaving, my entire life. It started with really small decisions of, like, what do I want to eat this week? Of, do I want to do this with my business? Do I want to go out to dinner with a friend? Do I want to go to this event and try and make new friends? Like, start small with things that probably don't have much of a life impact. What are you going to eat this week? What do you feel like eating this week? There are no substantial consequences to that question. You may have a meal that you don't particularly like, but outside of that, that's probably going to be the worst of the consequences versus, should I leave my job? Should I enter this new relationship? Should I leave this relationship? Should I leave my home? These are bigger questions and are much bigger things that, if starting small, can give you a little bit more fuel and belief in yourself making the bigger decisions. So one of the simplest ways, and one of the ways that I'll often recommend people start to learn how to trust themselves, is by keeping small promises to yourself. And, if you grew up in an unstable household in particular, or you had a lot of instability, especially once again, like early adulthood, and maybe you've made some quote unquote mistakes in your life, this is particularly true, and many people will not trust themselves. And understandably, maybe you were told not to trust yourself. Maybe you were told that this is not the way to do things, and you're wrong, and you made all these mistakes, and you ruined your life, and whatever stories you were told. So starting with small habits, and I recommend starting with one. Always recommend starting with one, and start with one that feels valuable and simple at the same time. A really common one is a mindfulness practice. Let's say you have 0 mindfulness practices in place. Start with hey, I'm going to promise myself that I'm going to do 1 minute of deep breathing at the end of my workday. At the very beginning of the day, before you even get out of bed, I'm just going to spend 1 minute and doing some deep breathing 3 days a week. And that's it. Now, if you do more than that, amazing, great, awesome. And 3 days a week for 1 minute, you probably can do. And if you're really struggling, set a timer, set reminders on your phone. That's a great tool to be able to have in your back pocket to start to incorporate these new things. I'll just give you another example of like movement. Movement's another really big one that people usually want to add in. Instead of, hey, I'm going to go to the gym 3 days a week, hey, I'm going to go for a 5-minute walk 2 or 3 times a week. 5-minute walk, 5 minutes. That's it. And as you start to make these promises to yourself and keep them, you start to build more trust and confidence in yourself, in your ability to change, to make decisions, to do these things. And that starts to build upon itself. And then you can start doing bigger and bigger things. And then you can start to open that up to, other people and different areas of your life, and making bigger shifts and listening to yourself more and in different ways. So, but you have to trust yourself. At the end of the day, worst case scenario, you only have yourself. And if you don't trust yourself, if you don't have confidence in yourself, how can you have trust and confidence in other people? And that's really important in your healing journey, especially with clients that I've been working with for a long time. I'll ask them, like, hey, here's what I'm thinking from a logical perspective. This is what makes the most sense. Now, what do you feel? What is coming up for you when I talk about this? How does this feel in your body? What is your body trying to tell us? Because at the end of the day, your body knows best about you. There's no one else living in your body except for you. And I can give guidance, I can give support. And at the end of the day, that person, that individual knows that. And that's really crucial and important. So I hope this helps. I hope this gives you maybe one or two things, or maybe many things to start thinking about in your journey work, in your deeper work. And the more you can really tap into these and lean into these, I promise you, this goes really far in your deeper healing work. And there's a lot of blocks that cannot be overcome until you start doing some of these things. And there is a real limitation in some of the deeper work that is able to be done, because these are really fundamental and foundational pieces of healing, of deeper healing work that sets you up to be able to dig even deeper into healing, into regulating more, into doing all of these things. So thank you so much for listening and joining in. Hopefully this helps. As always, like, subscribe, follow. If it resonates, a 5-star review really, really does mean the world to us. Thank you for joining. Hope you enjoyed, and we will see you next week.